The flight attendant's smug expression crumbled as Elijah Washington calmly placed his business card on her serving tray. Washington Industries CEO. I've just purchased controlling interest in your airline. Everyone on this crew is terminated, effective immediately. The first-class cabin fell silent as passengers lowered their phones, having recorded everything that came before. Before I dive into this incredible story of power, discrimination, and unexpected consequences, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more real stories about fighting injustice in America's corporate world. Now let's rewind to see how this shocking moment came to be. Elijah Washington stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Chicago penthouse, watching the sunrise paint Lake Michigan in hues of amber and gold. At 46, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had fought for every inch of his success. Today's meeting with Technova in San Francisco could revolutionize diversity in the tech industry, and he wasn't about to let anything derail it. Mr. Washington, your coffee. His housekeeper, Mrs. Jenkins, placed the steaming cup on his desk. Thank you, Doris, he replied, straightening his custom-tailored Armani suit. While other executives might flaunt their wealth with flashy watches or exotic cars, Elijah's only indulgence was his wardrobe. A well-cut suit was armor in the corporate world, especially for a black man. His phone vibrated. His daughter Zara's face lit up the screen, her Howard University dormitory visible in the background. Morning, Dad. Just wanted to wish you luck with the Technova meeting, she said, her smile bright despite the early hour. Thanks, sweetheart. How's the biochem project coming along? Almost finished. Professor Williams says it might be publication-worthy. Pride swelled in Elijah's chest. That's my girl. Following in your mother's scientific footsteps. A shadow crossed his face at the mention of his late wife. Maya had been gone 5 years now, cancer taking her too soon. Sometimes he still reached for her in the middle of the night. Dad? You okay? Zara asked, concern etching her features. Just thinking about how proud your mother would be, he said, pushing the melancholy aside. I'll call you after the meeting. Love you. Love you too. Show those Silicon Valley boys how it's done. After hanging up, Elijah closed his eyes, practicing the 5-minute mindfulness ritual that centered him before important days. The stillness brought him back to his grandmother's tiny kitchen in Chicago's South Side, where he'd grown up after his parents' car accident. You stand tall, Elijah, Grandma Ruth would say, straightening his second-hand clothes before school. Ain't nobody better than you, and you ain't better than nobody. But you gotta work twice as hard for half as much. That's just how it is. And work he had. Scholarships to Northwestern, 16-hour days at his first finance job, sleeping on a friend's couch to save money for his MBA. Now, as one of only 8 black CEOs in the Fortune 500, he carried the weight of responsibility for those coming behind him. The intercom buzzed, pulling him from his memories. Mr. Washington, Keisha is here for your briefing, Mrs. Jenkins announced. Keisha Reynolds, his executive assistant for 7 years, entered with her characteristic efficiency, tablet in hand. At 32, she was brilliant, with an MBA from Wharton and the kind of strategic mind that made Elijah regularly remind her she should be running her own company. Morning, Keisha. What's our battle plan? Technova's diversity numbers are abysmal, she began, pulling up charts on her tablet. Only 2% of their technical staff are black, with 0 black executives. Our proposal for Washington Industries to create a specialized recruitment and retention program is exactly what they need, especially with the government contracts they're pursuing. And the competition? Coleman Tech Solutions. Richard Coleman will be on your flight to San Francisco. Word is, their proposal focuses more on cosmetic diversity initiatives without addressing systemic issues. Elijah nodded. Richard Coleman. They'd crossed paths at industry events before, a typical old-guard tech executive who spoke about diversity while doing little to implement it. The board sent over the final presentation. I've uploaded it to your secure drive, Keisha continued. And Dr. Marshall from Howard called about the scholarship endowment. The first class of Washington scholars has a 98% retention rate. Elijah smiled. The program, providing full rides to black students pursuing STEM degrees, was his most personally meaningful initiative. That's excellent news. Anything else? Your town car is waiting. Driver's name is Marcus. And the Technova CEO mentioned golf, so I've packed your clubs. Always thinking ahead. Thanks, Keisha. Downstairs, Marcus Johnson waited beside the black Lincoln Continental. Elijah recognized the nervousness in the young man's demeanor immediately, the slightly too formal posture, the careful avoidance of direct eye contact. He'd seen it countless times, the uncertainty of how to act around someone like him, a black man of significant wealth and power. Good morning, Mr. Washington. O'Hare International, correct? Yes, Marcus. And please, call me Elijah. During the drive, Marcus glanced at him repeatedly in the rearview mirror before finally speaking. I hope you don't mind me asking, sir, but my son, he's 17, he wants to go into business. As a black man who's made it, do you have any advice I could pass along? The question was familiar. Elijah received similar requests weekly, in elevators, at conferences, through emails from strangers. The weight of being a representative never lightened. Tell him to find mentors who see his potential, not just his race. Tell him there will be rooms where he's the only one who looks like him, but that doesn't mean he doesn't belong there. Elijah paused. And tell him to remember that when he succeeds, to hold the door open for others. Marcus nodded earnestly. Thank you, sir. That means a lot. At O'Hare's executive entrance, the security guard eyed Elijah suspiciously despite his tailored suit and executive car. ID and boarding pass, please, he demanded, his tone noticeably different from the cordial, good morning, sir, he'd offered to the white executive ahead of Elijah. First class to San Francisco, Elijah said, presenting his credentials. The guard scrutinized the documentation longer than necessary before reluctantly waving him through. Another day, another reminder that his success hadn't exempted him from the reality of being black in America. He straightened his shoulders and walked into the terminal, mentally preparing for the day ahead. The Technova meeting wasn't just a potential business deal, it was another chance to change the system from within. The premium security line at O'Hare stretched longer than usual for a Tuesday morning. Elijah checked his watch, still plenty of time before boarding. He observed the TSA agents processing travelers with varying levels of scrutiny. A white businessman in front of him passed through with a cursory ID check, his laptop remaining in his bag despite protocol. When Elijah stepped forward, the agent's demeanor shifted instantly. First-class boarding pass. The agent's eyebrow raised skeptically as he examined Elijah's documentation. Can I see another form of ID? Elijah maintained his composed expression, a skill honed through years of similar interactions. He produced his driver's license while noticing the businessman behind him, also in first class, wasn't receiving the same treatment. Sir, you've been randomly selected for additional screening, the agent announced after a prolonged examination of his credentials. Random. Of course, Elijah replied evenly, stepping aside as directed. As another TSA agent patted him down, Elijah caught the uncomfortable glances of other travelers. Some quickly averted their eyes when he looked their way, while others stared with unabashed curiosity. He'd long ago stopped trying to determine which was worse, the shame-filled avoidance or the brazen gawking. Arms out, sir, the agent instructed, his tone suggesting Elijah might be unfamiliar with the procedure, despite his platinum frequent flyer card suggesting otherwise. After clearing security, Elijah headed toward the first-class lounge. He was reviewing presentation notes on his tablet when a familiar voice interrupted his concentration. Elijah Washington. Didn't expect to see you on this flight. Richard Coleman extended his hand, his 6-foot frame clad in a navy Brooks Brothers suit that couldn't quite conceal his slight paunch. At 53, Coleman had the confident air of someone who'd never questioned whether he belonged in exclusive spaces. "Richard," Elijah acknowledged, shaking the offered hand. "Heading to San Francisco as well?" "Indeed. Technova meeting, I presume?" "Quite the opportunity they're offering." Elijah nodded, maintaining his poker face. "It's an important conversation about the future of tech diversity." Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Always admired how you people make everything about diversity. Very on brand for Washington Industries." The phrase, "you people," hung in the air between them. Elijah had heard variations of this microaggression throughout his career, the implication that his success was somehow tied exclusively to his race rather than his business acumen. "Diversity drives innovation, Richard. The data supports it. But I suspect you know that." Richard laughed too loudly. "Always so serious. That's why you've done well, very focused. A credit to your community, truly." Before Elijah could respond, they reached the lounge entrance. The attendant smiled warmly at Richard, then looked at Elijah with sudden suspicion. "Good morning, Mr. Coleman," she said before turning to Elijah. "Can I see your membership card and boarding pass, sir?" Richard interjected before Elijah could produce his credentials. "He's with me, Diane. Mr. Washington is a business associate." The presumption that he couldn't possibly be a first-class passenger with his own lounge access burned, but Elijah simply presented his platinum card. "Actually, I have my own membership, thank you." The attendant's embarrassment was palpable as she scanned his card. "Of course, Mr. Washington. My apologies." Inside the lounge, Richard guided them to a quiet corner. "Scotch? My treat." "No thanks. I don't drink before meetings." "Smart man." "Water for my colleague, please," Richard told the passing server, not bothering to ask what Elijah might actually want. "So, I heard whispers about your proposal for Technova. Ambitious stuff." "I don't discuss pending deals, Richard." Of course. Just friendly conversation." Richard leaned closer. "Though between us, I think Technova's looking for practical solutions, not social experiments. They need someone who understands their culture." The implication was clear, that Elijah, as a black man, couldn't possibly understand Silicon Valley's culture. Before he could formulate a response that wouldn't be construed as the angry black man stereotype, his phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Jenkins, his board member and longtime ally: "Watch your back with Technova. Coleman's team spreading rumors about our financials." Elijah's jaw tightened. Sabotage wasn't new, but it never ceased to disappoint him. "Everything okay?" Richard asked, noticing his expression change. "Perfectly fine," Elijah replied, typing a quick response before placing a call to his lawyer. He stepped away from Richard, speaking in low tones. "David, I need you to look into some suspicious trading activity around our stock. Seems Coleman Tech might be trying to undermine our position before the Technova deal." His lawyer's voice came through clearly. "Already on it. There's been unusual shorting activity since yesterday. Nothing we can't handle, but it's definitely coordinated. Keep me posted." Elijah ended the call, turning to find Richard watching him with undisguised interest. The lounge speakers crackled to life. "Attention passengers, we're beginning the boarding process for Flight 2507 to San Francisco. First class and priority passengers may board at this time." Richard stood, straightening his jacket. "Shall we? May the best proposal win, Elijah." As they walked toward the gate, Elijah maintained professional courtesy while mentally preparing for the subtle battlefield of the first-class cabin. In his experience, the most insidious discrimination often came wrapped in luxury, the assumption that black excellence was an anomaly, an error to be questioned rather than a reality to be respected. The gate agent, a young black woman named Tiana according to her name tag, smiled genuinely when checking his boarding pass. "Have a pleasant flight, Mr. Washington." That small moment of recognition without suspicion felt like a breath of fresh air before the storm that was about to come. Elijah was first aboard Flight 2507, his priority status announced by the gate agent with appropriate deference. The jet bridge stretched before him, and he mentally shifted into travel mode, the practiced efficiency of a frequent flyer who moved through airports like second homes. At the aircraft door, flight attendant Veronica Patterson greeted passengers with a practiced smile that froze upon seeing Elijah. Her blonde hair was pulled into a tight bun, her makeup impeccable, her Continental Airlines uniform pressed to perfection. "Good morning," Elijah offered, presenting his boarding pass. Veronica's eyes darted from his face to the boarding pass and back again. "You're in, first class." The inflection in her voice made it a question rather than a confirmation. "Yes, 2A, window seat," Elijah replied evenly. "I'll need to see your boarding pass again," she said, her smile now tight and formal. She examined the document with exaggerated scrutiny, turning it over as if expecting to find evidence of forgery. "Is there a problem?" Elijah asked, maintaining his composure despite the familiar knot forming in his stomach, the sensation that accompanied these moments of casual prejudice. "It's just that first class is full today, and I want to make sure there hasn't been a mistake," Veronica replied, her tone suggesting she'd already determined where the mistake lay. Elijah was acutely aware of the line forming behind him. A white couple whispered to each other, watching the interaction with undisguised interest. "There's no mistake," he said firmly. "I'd like to take my seat now." Veronica's mouth tightened. "One moment, sir." She stepped back into the aircraft, boarding pass in hand, leaving Elijah standing awkwardly at the threshold. Through the open door, he could see her conferring with another crew member, gesturing toward the boarding pass and then back toward Elijah. The humiliation of being questioned, of having his presence in first class treated as an anomaly requiring verification, was all too familiar. A moment later, First Officer Greg Hartman emerged from the cockpit. Tall with salt and pepper hair, he projected the authoritative air of someone accustomed to deference. "Is there an issue here?" he asked, directing the question to Veronica rather than Elijah. "This passenger claims to have a first-class seat, but there must be some confusion," Veronica explained, her emphasis on claims making her skepticism clear. "I don't claim anything," Elijah interjected calmly. "My boarding pass clearly shows seat 2A, which I've paid for. I'm a platinum member with over 2 million miles on Continental." The first officer examined the boarding pass with the same unwarranted suspicion as Veronica. "Your name is Elijah Washington?" "Yes, it is." "Do you have additional identification?" The request was beyond standard protocol, boarding passes had already been verified at the gate. But Elijah produced his driver's license without comment. Making a scene would only reinforce stereotypes he'd fought against his entire career. As this exchange continued, Richard Coleman approached the aircraft door, his own first-class boarding pass in hand. "What's the holdup, Elijah?" he asked, then turned to Veronica with a warm smile. "Everything all right here?" Veronica's demeanor transformed instantly. "Good morning, sir. Welcome aboard. We're just sorting out a seating issue." "No issue to sort," Elijah stated firmly. "My boarding pass and ID have been verified multiple times now." From further back in the jet bridge, a young black woman in economy class observed the situation, her expression a mixture of anger and resignation. When she caught Elijah's eye, she gave him a small nod of solidarity, the universal acknowledgement between black Americans who recognized the ritual of discrimination playing out. "Well, Mr. Coleman, your seat is 3C. "Right this way," Veronica said, practically glowing with hospitality as she ushered Richard past Elijah. "Veronica, I've known Elijah for years. He's the CEO of Washington Industries," Richard offered, his intervention carrying the patronizing tone of vouching for someone who couldn't possibly belong otherwise. First Officer Hartman cleared his throat. "Regardless, we have procedures." Elijah stood his ground. And those procedures don't include demanding additional identification after gate verification or treating first-class passengers differently based on their appearance. By now, the boarding line had grown substantially, with passengers craning their necks to witness the commotion. Veronica's face flushed with annoyance rather than embarrassment. "Sir, if you'd like to resolve this situation quickly, perhaps you could take a seat in economy for now, and we can sort this out after takeoff," she suggested, her tone making it clear this wasn't really a suggestion. "No," Elijah replied, his voice calm but firm. "I will not accept being downgraded because your staff can't believe a black man belongs in first class." The word "black" seemed to electrify the air. Several passengers exchanged glances, and smartphones began to emerge, recording the escalating situation. "No one said anything about race," First Officer Hartman said defensively. "No one had to," Elijah responded. "Your actions speak clearly enough." The standoff at the aircraft door intensified as Captain Bradley Stevens emerged from the cockpit, his authoritative presence immediately commanding attention. Tall with a military bearing, he surveyed the scene with practiced neutrality before addressing Elijah. "I understand there's some confusion about seating arrangements," he began diplomatically, though his eyes held the same skepticism as his crew's. "There's no confusion, Captain," Elijah responded. "Only unwarranted scrutiny of a valid first-class ticket holder." More passengers had gathered now, many openly recording the interaction on their phones. Elijah noticed several shaking their heads in disapproval, though whether at him or the crew's behavior remained unclear. "Mr. Washington, was it?" Captain Stevens asked, despite the name being clearly printed on the boarding pass in Veronica's hand. "We're simply following protocol to ensure everyone's comfort and safety." "Is your protocol to verify the credentials of all first-class passengers multiple times? Or just those who look like me?" Elijah challenged, his calm demeanor belying his rising frustration. Veronica interjected, "Sir, your attitude isn't helping the situation." "And what attitude would that be?" Elijah asked. "I've remained professional while being treated like an imposter." "Have you ever witnessed discrimination in a situation where you should have felt comfortable and welcomed?" Comment number 1 if you believe Elijah should stand his ground, or number 2 if you think he should just take another seat to avoid further conflict. If you're enjoying this story of courage in the face of prejudice, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about fighting back against everyday injustice. Now, what do you think happens when an airline crew pushes a powerful CEO too far? "Mr. Washington," Captain Stevens continued, his tone hardening, "we can resolve this amicably, or we may need to contact airport security. Your choice." The veiled threat hung in the air, another familiar experience for Elijah. Throughout his career, security had been weaponized against him, from being followed in high-end stores to campus police stopping him while walking to his own office at Northwestern. "Are you threatening to have me removed for attempting to sit in the seat I purchased?" Elijah asked, loud enough for the recording passengers to hear clearly. Richard Coleman stepped forward, attempting to mediate. "Bradley, I can vouch for Elijah. He's a respected business leader." Elijah bristled at needing a white man's vouching, but kept his focus on the captain. "I don't need character references, Richard. What I need is to be treated with the same respect afforded to other passengers." Airline supervisor Amanda Collins pushed through the growing crowd, her customer service smile strained. "What seems to be the problem here?" "The problem," Elijah explained deliberately, "is a pattern of discriminatory treatment. I've been asked for multiple forms of ID, had my ticket questioned repeatedly, and now been threatened with security, all for attempting to access the first-class seat I purchased." Amanda's smile didn't waver. "I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. No one is discriminating against you, Mr. Washington." "Then explain why I'm the only passenger receiving this level of scrutiny," Elijah challenged. "Perhaps because you're being difficult," Veronica muttered, just loud enough to be heard. The comment triggered a memory from Elijah's early career, his first major client presentation as an investment analyst. Despite his impeccable research and preparation, the client had complained about his attitude when he'd simply defended his analysis with confidence. His white colleagues were assertive, he was difficult. "I've remained professional throughout this interaction," Elijah stated. "What you're perceiving as difficulty is simply my refusal to accept discriminatory treatment." Amanda's smile finally faltered. "Mr. Washington, with all due respect, not everything is about race. You're holding up boarding for all passengers." "I'm not holding up anything," Elijah countered. "Your crew is delaying boarding by refusing to honor my ticket." Social media notifications were beginning to ping on Elijah's phone, the videos were already circulating online. Hashtag First Class While Black was trending, with passengers tagging Continental Airlines in their posts. Richard stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Elijah, perhaps it's best to just take your seat and file a complaint later." The Technova meeting. "Would you surrender your seat, Richard?" Elijah asked pointedly. "Would you accept being treated as less than what you paid for?" Richard fell silent, the question answering itself. "Mr. Washington," Amanda said with forced patience, "no one is suggesting you're less than. But if you feel you're being racially profiled, perhaps that says more about you than us. Some might say you're playing the race card." The phrase hit Elijah like a physical blow. The race card, the accusation that had followed him from the South Side to the boardroom, the implication that racism was a game and he was cheating by naming it. "The only card I'm playing," he replied coldly, "is my credit card, which was charged several $1,000s for a first-class seat I'm now being prevented from claiming." By now, the cabin crew's behavior had attracted attention from other Continental staff. The gate agent, Tiana, had approached and was watching with evident discomfort. "This is ridiculous," a passenger in line muttered loudly. "Either let the man sit or refund his money." Captain Stevens's face reddened. "Sir, I need to prepare for departure. Are you going to cooperate, or do we need to remove you from this flight?" Elijah took a measured breath, decades of corporate navigation guiding his response. "Captain, I've been more than cooperative. I'm simply asking to be seated in the accommodation I purchased, without further harassment." Veronica scoffed audibly. "Harassment? We're just doing our jobs." "Your job includes ensuring equal treatment of all passengers," Elijah pointed out. Amanda's customer service veneer cracked completely. "Mr. Washington, I'm going to have to ask you to either take a seat in economy for now or deplane. You're disrupting our boarding process." It was the final straw. The suggestion that he should accept less than what he'd paid for, that his dignity was negotiable for others' convenience. Elijah reached for his phone. "Actually," he said calmly, "I need to make a call." The cabin fell oddly silent as Elijah dialed a number from his contacts. The first-class passengers, already seated, watched the confrontation with undisguised interest, while those still in the jet bridge craned their necks to see what would happen next. "Marcus? Elijah Washington here," he spoke clearly into the phone, maintaining direct eye contact with Captain Stevens. "Remember our discussion last week about diversifying our transportation holdings? I'd like to proceed with option C immediately." He paused, listening to the response. "Yes, Continental Airlines. I want controlling interest. Whatever it takes." Captain Stevens's expression shifted from annoyance to confusion. Amanda Collins exchanged uncertain glances with Veronica, who had crossed her arms defensively across her chest. "I understand the board hasn't formally approved it yet," Elijah continued, "but as majority shareholder, I'm authorizing the emergency acquisition. Have the financial team execute immediately." Another pause. "Yes, I'll hold." Richard Coleman's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Elijah, you can't be serious." "Never been more serious in my life, Richard," Elijah replied, his hand covering the phone's microphone. "Washington Industries has been considering airline acquisition for months. This crew just accelerated my timeline." The cabin crew's skepticism was transforming into uncertainty. First Officer Hartman leaned toward Captain Stevens, whispering urgently. Sir, Amanda began cautiously, perhaps we should. Elijah held up a finger, returning to his call. Go ahead with the wire transfer. I want confirmation within 5 minutes. He ended the call and fixed his gaze on the crew. Now, about my seat. Mr. Washington, Captain Stevens said, his tone markedly different, perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Elijah interrupted, was your crew believing that discrimination would have no consequences. His phone pinged with an incoming email. He displayed the screen toward Captain Stevens, showing a confirmation from his financial team. Washington Industries now holds 26% of Continental Airlines stock, the largest single ownership position. As controlling shareholder, I'm exercising my right to make immediate personnel changes. The color drained from Captain Stevens's face. You can't just. I can, and I am, Elijah stated firmly. Effective immediately, this flight crew is terminated for discriminatory practices against passengers. Gasps echoed through the cabin. A passenger in 1C whispered audibly, holy shit, did he just fire them? Veronica's smugness had evaporated completely, replaced by shock. This is absurd. You can't possibly. Elijah removed a business card from his wallet and placed it on her serving tray. Washington Industries CEO. I've just purchased controlling interest in your airline. Everyone on this crew is terminated, effective immediately. The first-class cabin fell silent as passengers lowered their phones, having recorded everything that came before. This moment, this reversal of power, was now being captured for posterity. Richard Coleman stood frozen, recalculating his position in this dramatically shifted landscape. Elijah, I had no idea Washington Industries was moving into transportation. There's a lot you don't know about me, Richard, Elijah replied coolly. Amanda Collins's phone rang shrilly, breaking the stunned silence. She answered, her professional composure crumbling as she listened. Yes, sir. Mr. Daniels, I understand. Yes, he's right here. She extended the phone toward Elijah with a trembling hand. It's the CEO of Continental. Elijah took the phone. James, I was just about to call you. Yes, the acquisition is real. No, this isn't negotiable. Your flight crew demonstrated discriminatory practices that I won't tolerate in any company I control. He listened briefly. I'm glad we understand each other. I expect an emergency board meeting within 48 hours. He returned the phone to Amanda, whose face had gone ashen. Mr. Daniels would like to speak with you privately. As Amanda stepped away for her conversation, murmurs spread throughout the cabin. Passengers who had been recording now shared the videos on social media platforms, where #BlackCOPower was rapidly overtaking #FirstClassWhileBlack as the trending hashtag. Captain Stevens appeared utterly deflated. Mr. Washington, surely we can discuss this reasonably. We're beyond discussion, Captain. You had your opportunity for reasonable conversation when I first presented my boarding pass. Instead, you chose intimidation and threats. Tiana, the gate agent, approached with a tablet in hand. Mr. Washington, Continental Airlines management has asked me to inform you that a new flight crew is being assembled immediately. The CEO extends his personal apologies for your experience. Elijah nodded. Thank you, Tiana. Veronica, finally grasping the reality of the situation, attempted damage control. Mr. Washington, I sincerely apologize if you felt. Save it, Elijah cut her off. An apology that begins with, if you felt, isn't an apology at all. It's a deflection of responsibility. But my job, she began. Is no longer your concern, Elijah finished for her. Though I'll ensure due process is followed despite my personal feelings about your behavior. The announcement system crackled to life. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the gate agent speaking. Flight 2507 to San Francisco will be delayed approximately 45 minutes due to an administrative crew change. We apologize for the inconvenience and will begin boarding with our new crew shortly. Passengers in the jet bridge groaned at the delay, though many seemed more fascinated than annoyed by the unfolding drama. Elijah finally moved past the stunned crew and took his seat in 2A, straightening his suit jacket as he sat down. Richard Coleman slipped into his own seat across the aisle, his expression a mixture of shock and calculation. "That was quite a power move, Elijah." "It wasn't a move, Richard. It was a response to a situation that millions of Black Americans face daily, without the resources to address it." As the disgraced crew filed off the aircraft, Elijah felt no satisfaction, only a weary recognition that his success had given him tools most victims of discrimination would never have. His phone buzzed with an incoming call from his PR director, no doubt responding to the social media explosion already underway. Before he could answer, a message from his daughter Zara appeared. "Dad, you're trending on Twitter." What happened? The real work was just beginning. 40 minutes later, an entirely new flight crew boarded the aircraft. The replacement captain, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair, approached Elijah's seat directly. "Mr. Washington, I'm Captain Rebecca Martinez. On behalf of Continental Airlines, I want to personally apologize for your experience today. We're ready for departure whenever you are." Elijah nodded his acknowledgement. "Thank you, Captain Martinez. I appreciate your professionalism." As the new crew prepared for takeoff, Elijah's phone continued buzzing with notifications. His PR director had sent an urgent message, videos going viral. #BlackCOPower trending nationwide. Major networks requesting statements. How do you want to proceed? Continental's social media accounts were being flooded with comments, their stock had dropped 7 points in 30 minutes, and Washington Industries shares were surging as investors reacted to the unexpected acquisition. Despite the commotion, Elijah's thoughts turned to the fired crew. He was angry, yes, but not vindictive. He placed a call to his HR director. "Janet, regarding the Continental crew members, make sure they receive proper termination procedures. No shortcuts, even for cause." "Understood," Janet replied. "Though after what they did." "Process matters," Elijah interrupted. "Especially when we're justified in our actions." The replacement crew was exceptionally attentive during boarding. Elijah had been upgraded to the private executive cabin section, normally reserved for airline officials, a transparent attempt at damage control by Continental management. Once settled, Elijah glimpsed Richard Coleman making his way toward him. "Mind if I join you?" Richard asked, gesturing to the adjacent seat. "Free country," Elijah replied, returning his attention to his tablet. Richard sat down, loosening his tie. "You know, I've been in business 30 years, and I've never seen anything like that." "Like what? A black man refusing to be mistreated? Or consequences actually being applied for discrimination?" Richard shifted uncomfortably. "Look, Elijah, I want you to know I had nothing to do with how the crew treated you." "Didn't you?" Elijah looked up. "You didn't cause it directly, but you benefited from the system that created it. When was the last time you were asked for multiple forms of ID to sit in a seat you paid for?" Before Richard could answer, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and paled slightly. "Excuse me, I need to take this." As Richard moved away, Elijah overheard fragments. "Yes, I understand the concerns." "No, Coleman Tech's diversity record isn't. We can implement new policies immediately." The ripple effects were already spreading. Richard's company, with its abysmal diversity statistics, was clearly feeling the pressure from investors and partners wary of association with another discrimination scandal. Elijah's phone lit up with a message from Zara. "Dad, I'm so proud of you. But also worried about the backlash. Are you okay?" His throat tightened. Maya had always been the one to help Zara understand the complexity of navigating America as a black person of privilege. In her absence, he tried to balance preparing his daughter for reality while preserving her optimism. "I'm fine, sweetheart," he typed back. "Sometimes standing your ground means weathering a storm. We'll talk later. As the plane reached cruising altitude, passengers began approaching Elijah, some offering support, others seeking explanations, and a few boldly requesting selfies with the CEO who fired a whole crew. He handled each interaction with grace, though the emotional toll of becoming an instant symbol was beginning to weigh on him. One man lingered after the others had returned to their seats, an older black gentleman with silver temples and tired eyes. "Mr. Washington," he began quietly, "I just wanted to say thank you. My son is a pilot with Continental, one of only 17 black captains in the entire airline. What you did today, it matters." Elijah extended his hand. "What's your name, sir?" "James. James Thornton. Retired teacher." "It's an honor, Mr. Thornton. Please tell your son I look forward to meeting him." As James returned to his seat, a flight attendant approached with a satellite phone. "Mr. Washington, the Continental CEO is requesting to speak with you." The conversation was brief and deferential, assurances of a full investigation, promises of systemic changes, and confirmation that the Washington Industries acquisition would be expedited through board approval. Throughout the flight, Elijah noticed passengers sharing their own stories of discrimination, an impromptu listening session spreading through the cabin. A Latina executive described being mistaken for janitorial staff in her own office building. An Indian doctor recounted patients refusing his care despite his credentials. The conversations transcended the usual superficial airplane small talk, creating an unexpected community of shared experiences. Meanwhile, Richard Coleman had retreated to his original seat, engrossed in urgent calls. Occasionally, he glanced toward Elijah with an unreadable expression, perhaps resentment, perhaps recalculation. When the meal service began, the flight attendant serving Richard was overheard saying, "Mr. Coleman, I understand your company is interested in diversity initiatives. My brother runs a consulting firm specializing in DEI training." The networking opportunism might have been amusing under different circumstances, but it highlighted a frustrating reality. For many, diversity only became important when financially advantageous. Midway through the flight, Continental's social media team had mobilized, issuing a statement, "Continental Airlines is committed to creating an inclusive environment for all passengers. We are investigating today's incident and taking immediate action to ensure our service reflects our values." The corporate boilerplate rang hollow to Elijah, who had heard similar platitudes throughout his career. Real change required more than statements, it demanded accountability, resources, and sustained commitment beyond the news cycle of a viral incident. As San Francisco appeared on the horizon, Elijah prepared for the media presence that would likely await him. His PR director confirmed that all major networks had requested interviews, and Washington Industries' phone lines were jammed with calls from investors, diversity advocates, and airline industry analysts. What had begun as a routine business trip had transformed into something far more significant, a visible confrontation with the invisible barriers that persisted despite his success, wealth, and position. As the captain announced their descent, Elijah found himself reflecting on his grandmother's words, "You stand tall, Elijah." Today, he had stood not just for himself, but for countless others who encountered similar treatment without the power to respond. The question now was how to channel this unexpected spotlight into meaningful change rather than momentary vindication. The moment the aircraft doors opened at San Francisco International Airport, Elijah could sense the difference. Airport staff stood at attention, their postures reflecting the news that had traveled faster than the flight itself. A Continental Airlines executive vice president waited at the jet bridge, flanked by apologetic customer service representatives. "Mr. Washington, I'm Eve Chen, Executive VP of Operations," she said, extending her hand. "We've arranged private transportation to your hotel and would like to schedule a meeting at your earliest convenience." "Tomorrow morning, Ms. Chen," Elijah replied. "Today, I have other priorities." As he navigated through the terminal, heads turned and whispers followed. Several passengers approached for handshakes or fist bumps, many filming the interactions on their phones. The incident had clearly transcended a typical customer service complaint. Near baggage claim, a small group of reporters had gathered, alerted by the viral videos that had accumulated millions of views during the 5-hour flight. Mr. Washington, can you comment on the incident aboard Continental Flight 2507? Is it true you purchased the airline just to fire the crew? Do you plan to pursue legal action against Continental? Elijah raised a hand, the gesture quieting the questions. I'll make a full statement tomorrow. Today, I'll simply say that what happened reflects experiences familiar to many Black Americans, regardless of their position or achievements. The difference is that I had the resources to respond. He moved past the reporters toward the exit, where his phone buzzed with a notification. Technova's CEO had sent a personal message, Elijah, we've been following the news. Our executive team would like to meet you at your hotel rather than our offices. More private. Interesting. The meeting location change suggested either concern about association with controversy or a desire to demonstrate support away from prying eyes. Either way, the power dynamic had shifted. In the car to his hotel, Elijah watched a news segment about the incident. The former flight crew had already given interviews, Veronica Patterson tearfully claiming there had been a misunderstanding, and that race had nothing to do with it. Captain Stevens insisted they had simply been following protocol, and that Elijah had overreacted. The narrative was predictable, the denial, the minimization, the suggestion that the victim had somehow manufactured the discrimination. It was the same script Elijah had witnessed throughout his life, from schoolyard incidents to boardroom slights. Social media told a different story. #BlackCEOPower had become a platform for sharing similar experiences, with Black professionals recounting their own stories of being questioned, doubted, and excluded despite their credentials. Washington Industries stock had climbed 12% as investors recognized the strategic value of the airline acquisition, while Continental shares continued to fall. Upon arriving at his hotel suite, Elijah found it filled with elaborate flower arrangements and gift baskets, peace offerings from various business associates suddenly eager to demonstrate their allegiance. Richard Coleman had sent an expensive bottle of scotch with a note, perhaps we should talk before tomorrow's meeting. Too little, too late. A knock at the door revealed his head of security, Devin Williams, who had flown in separately. Sir, we've increased your detail given the media attention. And the Continental Board is in emergency session right now. Thank you, Devin. Any word from the airline's legal team? They're scrambling. Their general counsel requested a call, but your attorney advised holding off until they make a formal offer. Elijah nodded, loosening his tie. And the Technova meeting? Still on for 6 o'clock, here in your suite. Their entire executive leadership is coming, not just the committee we expected. The power of visibility. What had been a standard business presentation had transformed into a must-attend event for Technova's leadership, either to distance themselves from potential controversy or to align with a suddenly more influential player. While reviewing his presentation materials, Elijah took a video call from the former Continental flight attendant who had originally caught his eye during boarding, the young Black woman who had nodded in solidarity. Mr. Washington, I'm Maya Jones, she began, voice slightly trembling. I wanted to thank you. I've worked for Continental for 3 years and witnessed countless incidents like what happened to you. Last month, I filed a discrimination complaint after being repeatedly passed over for first-class routes. Yesterday, they told me my contract wouldn't be renewed. Today, after what happened, HR called to offer me a permanent position and promotion. Elijah felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and weariness. I'm glad something positive came from this, Ms. Jones. But it shouldn't take a viral incident for qualified people to be treated fairly. I know, she agreed. That's why I'm organizing a group of minority Continental employees to propose structural changes while the company is receptive. Would you be willing to advise us? The request touched him. This was how real change happened, not through grand gestures by powerful individuals, but through collective action by those within the system. Send me your proposal, Ms. Jones. You'll have my full support. As the hour for the Technova meeting approached, Elijah received another call, this time from the Continental Airlines board chairman, requesting an urgent meeting before their public statement. The conversation was brief and revealing. They were prepared to offer significant concessions, including executive diversity commitments and a complete overhaul of training procedures. With all due respect, Mr. Washington, the chairman concluded, we hope you'll consider a partnership rather than an adversarial approach. Continental could benefit from your leadership. Send me your proposal, Elijah replied, echoing his response to Maya Jones. Actions will speak louder than promises. At precisely 6 o'clock, Technova's delegation arrived. To Elijah's surprise, the group included not only the expected executives but also Richard Coleman, looking distinctly uncomfortable. Technova's CEO, Victoria Zhang, took the lead. Mr. Washington, first let me say that what happened today was unacceptable. We were deeply troubled by the videos. Elijah maintained his professional demeanor. Thank you, Ms. Zhang, but I'd prefer to focus on the business at hand rather than this morning's incident. She nodded, but continued, the thing is, Elijah, may I call you Elijah, this morning's events have made us reconsider our approach to diversity initiatives. Richard has been transparent about the limitations of his proposal, and we believe your model offers more substantive change. Richard shifted in his seat, his expression suggesting this transparency had been recently and reluctantly acquired. I see, Elijah replied carefully. And has this reconsideration led to any specific changes in your expectations for our partnership? Victoria exchanged glances with her team before responding. Actually, yes. We'd like to discuss an expanded scope, with Washington Industries taking a more central role in transforming our hiring and retention practices. As the meeting progressed, it became clear that the airline incident had created leverage Elijah hadn't anticipated. Technova, fearful of their own potential for a similar PR disaster, was now eager to demonstrate their commitment to diversity through a high-profile partnership with Washington Industries. Richard Coleman, meanwhile, had been relegated to a supporting role, his company now positioned as a technical subcontractor rather than an equal partner. The power shift was palpable, and though Elijah took no pleasure in Richard's diminishment, he recognized the opportunity it presented for meaningful impact. By meeting's end, they had outlined a framework far more ambitious than Elijah's original proposal, a joint venture that would create pathways for minority talent not just within Technova but throughout the tech ecosystem. As the Technova team departed, Richard lingered behind. This isn't how I expected today to go, he admitted. Life rarely meets our expectations, Richard, Elijah replied. Sometimes it falls short. Sometimes it demands more of us than we plan to give. Richard nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about this morning. I should have said something when they were questioning you. Yes, you should have, Elijah agreed. But the more important question is what you'll say and do tomorrow, and the day after that. Allyship isn't a moment, it's a practice. After Richard left, Elijah stood at the hotel window, looking out at the San Francisco skyline. The day had been a roller coaster of discrimination, vindication, and unexpected opportunity. Yet beneath the professional victory lay a personal exhaustion familiar to anyone who had served as an unwilling symbol in America's ongoing conversation about race. His phone buzzed with a text from Zara, "Just saw your CNN interview clip. You were amazing, Dad. Mom would be so proud." The message brought both warmth and a renewed sense of purpose. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, media interviews, board discussions, contract negotiations. But tonight, he would rest, knowing that sometimes standing your ground could shift the very earth beneath everyone's feet. The Technova headquarters gleamed in the morning sunlight, its curved glass facade reflecting the San Francisco Bay. Elijah arrived early for the formal signing, having navigated a gauntlet of media interviews and Continental Airlines negotiations since dawn. In the 24 hours since the flight incident, public reaction had crystallized along predictable lines. Some hailed him as a hero who had leveraged privilege to combat discrimination, others criticized him as an elitist who had overreacted to poor customer service. The truth, as always, lay somewhere in the complex middle, a reality too nuanced for hashtags and sound bites. As he entered the conference room, Elijah noticed the subtle but significant changes in how he was received. The Technova executives, who might previously have offered perfunctory handshakes, now stood to greet him. Victoria Zhang had placed him at her right hand, a symbolic positioning not lost on anyone present. "Before we begin," Victoria announced once everyone was seated, "I'd like to acknowledge yesterday's events. What happened on that continental flight represents exactly the kind of systemic issues our partnership aims to address. Sometimes it takes an incident to illuminate a larger truth." Murmurs of agreement circulated around the table. Elijah maintained his professional demeanor, though internally he noted the irony, how quickly corporate America could reframe discrimination as a learning opportunity once power dynamics shifted. "Thank you, Victoria," he responded. "But I'd suggest we focus less on the incident itself and more on the work ahead. Symbol without substance creates no lasting change." Richard Coleman entered slightly late, nodding apologetically as he took the last available seat, noticeably distant from the center of power. His usual confidence had been replaced by a cautious attentiveness. "Now," Victoria continued, "let's discuss the framework of our joint venture. As agreed yesterday, Washington Industries will lead the diversity initiative, with Coleman Tech providing technical infrastructure." Richard cleared his throat. "Actually, if I may. I've been reflecting on yesterday's events and our discussion afterward, Elijah." The room fell silent, all eyes shifting between Richard and Elijah. "I had a long conversation last night with my Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Williams," Richard continued. "She's been trying to get my attention about these issues for years, and I finally listened. With your permission, I'd like to share some of her insights." Elijah nodded, genuinely curious about this unexpected development. Richard opened a folder, hands slightly unsteady. Dr. Williams pointed out that Coleman Tech's diversity initiatives have been largely cosmetic: recruitment events without retention programs, mentorship without advancement pathways. "We've been collecting diversity data without implementing changes based on the findings." The candid admission surprised everyone, not least Victoria, whose expression suggested she hadn't anticipated this level of transparency. "Coleman Tech employs over 2,000 engineers," Richard continued. "Fewer than 6% are black, and only 2% are in leadership positions. Those numbers haven't changed in 5 years, despite our public commitments." Elijah studied Richard carefully. This vulnerability seemed genuine, perhaps the first honest moment in their years of professional acquaintance. "What are you proposing, Richard?" Elijah asked. "A more substantive partnership. Not just Washington Industries leading with Coleman Tech in a supporting role, but a true collaboration. Your expertise in creating inclusive systems combined with our technical resources. And," he hesitated, "I'd like to make this personal. I've committed to working directly with Dr. Williams on transforming our company culture, starting with executive training for myself." The conference room remained silent as the implications of this offer settled. What had begun as competitive posturing had evolved into something more meaningful. Victoria Zhang, ever the strategic thinker, recognized the potential immediately. "A joint commitment from both your companies would send a powerful message to the entire tech industry. Technova would be proud to serve as the platform for this partnership." As the discussion progressed, the initial framework expanded into something far more ambitious: a tech incubator specifically for minority entrepreneurs, backed by $1 billion commitment to diverse hiring and retention programs across all 3 companies. During a coffee break, Elijah found himself alone with Richard near the refreshment table. "This is quite a pivot from yesterday morning," Elijah observed. Richard nodded, stirring his coffee absently. "After our conversation, I called Martin Taylor, you know, from Westridge Ventures. We played golf last month, and he mentioned a black colleague who'd left tech entirely after being passed over repeatedly. I never really processed it at the time. And now? I called him last night. 2-hour conversation. He walked me through a typical day, the subtle questions about his credentials, the assumptions about his role in meetings, the constant need to prove himself. It was like seeing a parallel universe that existed alongside mine, invisible until someone pointed it out. Elijah had heard similar epiphanies before, well-intentioned white colleagues suddenly discovering racism as though it were a hidden archaeological find rather than the daily reality of their coworkers. Yet Richard's willingness to acknowledge his company's failures publicly represented a step beyond performative allyship. Awareness is the beginning, not the end, Elijah cautioned. The real work happens when the hashtags stop trending. I know, Richard admitted. That's why I'm asking for your guidance, not just your partnership. This isn't about salvaging a deal or protecting my company's image. At least, not anymore. As they returned to the conference table, Elijah reflected on the unexpected leverage created by yesterday's discrimination. The flight incident had opened doors that might otherwise have remained closed, creating space for conversations that business as usual would have deferred indefinitely. By the meeting's conclusion, they had drafted a comprehensive agreement that went far beyond Elijah's original proposal. Technova would implement Washington Industries' diversity framework company-wide, Coleman Tech would develop technology to measure progress and identify barriers, and all three companies would commit to transparent reporting of outcomes. The subsequent press conference attracted major networks and tech publications. Victoria, Richard, and Elijah presented a united front, three industry leaders committing to measurable change rather than aspirational statements. This partnership represents a turning point, Victoria told the assembled reporters. Not just for our companies, but for the industry as a whole. We're moving beyond diversity as a buzzword to diversity as a business imperative. When a reporter asked about the Continental Airlines incident, Elijah responded carefully, yesterday's events created an opportunity for dialogue. Today's agreement transforms that dialogue into action. My hope is that we're remembered for what we built together, not the circumstances that brought us to the table. As cameras flashed and questions continued, Elijah noticed Richard stepping forward to address a particularly pointed inquiry about Coleman Tech's previous diversity failures. We've fallen short, Richard acknowledged without defensiveness. That's a matter of record. This partnership isn't about erasing that history but about writing a different future. And yes, it took a wake-up call for me personally to recognize the gap between our stated values and our lived practices. The admission wasn't perfect, it still centered Richard's journey rather than the experiences of those affected by his company's failures, but it represented progress. Allies were made, not born, and Elijah had learned to value direction over perfection. After the press conference, as they exited the building, Richard mentioned a dinner invitation from Victoria to celebrate the partnership. Elijah checked his watch, considering the offer. His flight back to Chicago departed in 3 hours, a different airline this time. Rain check, Richard. I need to get home to my daughter. Of course, Richard nodded. This is just the beginning anyway. We have work to do. As his car navigated toward the airport, Elijah reflected on the whirlwind 24 hours. What had begun as a routine business trip had catalyzed unexpected change, not just for the airline that had discriminated against him, but for 3 major companies and potentially an entire industry. His phone buzzed with a text from his board chairman, Continental stock down 15%. Our acquisition proceeding at favorable terms. You've turned discrimination into a business victory, Elijah. The message felt somehow hollow. While the financial outcome benefited Washington Industries, the true measure of success would be whether this moment translated into sustained change, for flight attendants like Maya Jones, for tech workers at companies like Technova, and for the next generation of black professionals who deserved opportunity without extraordinary resilience as a prerequisite. As the car approached the airport, another text arrived, this one from Zara. Professor Williams wants me to present our research at the national conference. Said my analysis was exceptional. Flying high today, Dad. This, Elijah thought, was the victory that mattered most, his daughter soaring on her own merits, her path perhaps a fraction easier because of stands taken by those who came before her. Whether in airplane cabins or corporate boardrooms, the work continued, one confrontation, one alliance, one achievement at a time. 6 months later, Elijah Washington found himself once again at O'Hare International Airport, preparing to board a Continental Airlines flight to Los Angeles. The airline had undergone remarkable transformation under the joint ownership of Washington Industries and its original parent company, a partnership forged through intense negotiations rather than complete acquisition. The differences were immediately apparent. The gate agents and flight attendants represented visibly diverse backgrounds. New training protocols had been implemented company-wide, with Maya Jones, now Continental's Director of Inclusive Customer Experience, leading the initiative. "Good morning, Mr. Washington," the gate agent greeted him warmly. "We're honored to have you flying with us today." As Elijah moved through the jet bridge, he reflected on the changes of the past half-year. The viral incident had become a Harvard Business School case study on corporate response to discrimination. Continental's diversity metrics were now published quarterly, with transparent accountability for improvement. Most significantly, an industry consortium had formed to address systemic bias in customer service across the travel sector. Yet for every step forward, resistance remained. Anonymous airline employees had created forums complaining about forced diversity and political correctness. Opinion pieces questioned whether corporations were overreacting to isolated incidents. The path toward equity never progressed in a straight line. Boarding the aircraft, Elijah was greeted by a flight attendant who recognized him immediately. "Mr. Washington, welcome aboard. Captain Rodriguez asked me to extend her personal welcome." Taking his seat in first class, without question or hesitation this time, Elijah settled in for the flight. As other passengers boarded, he noticed occasional glances of recognition, though the initial fame from the incident had largely faded as news cycles moved on to fresh controversies. Just before the cabin door closed, a familiar face appeared in the aisle, Veronica Patterson, the flight attendant whose discriminatory treatment had sparked the viral confrontation. She was dressed in business casual attire rather than a uniform, clearly a passenger rather than crew. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. The awkwardness hung between them like a physical presence. Veronica hesitated, then approached his seat. "Mr. Washington," she began, her voice slightly unsteady. "I didn't know you'd be on this flight." "Ms. Patterson," he acknowledged with a neutral nod. She glanced around, lowering her voice. "I wanted to tell you, after everything that happened. I've been doing a lot of thinking. And learning." Elijah studied her face, searching for the sincerity behind her words. "I'm glad to hear that. After I was terminated, I was angry at first," she continued. "Blamed everyone but myself. But then I enrolled in this program. Continental's new diversity education initiative. It was eye-opening." "In what way?" Elijah asked, genuinely curious about her journey. "I never thought of myself as prejudiced," Veronica explained. "I have black friends, I voted for Obama. But the training helped me see how many assumptions I made automatically. About who belongs where. About what success looks like." She paused. "About first class." The conversation might have ended there, a brief, awkward acknowledgement between two people connected by a difficult moment. But Veronica continued, surprising him. "I'm actually heading to Los Angeles for a job interview. A diversity training position with an airline consulting firm. I want to use my experience, the good and the bad, to help others avoid making the same mistakes." Elijah considered this unexpected development. "That's a significant career shift." "It is," she agreed. "But sometimes it takes a seismic event to change your direction." A flight attendant approached, politely indicating that Veronica needed to find her seat as departure was imminent. Before leaving, she handed Elijah a business card. "I don't expect anything, Mr. Washington. But if you ever wanted to hear about the program that changed my perspective, I'd be honored to talk." As she moved toward economy class, Elijah examined the card. It listed her new credentials, Diversity Education Specialist, in training. The transformation seemed genuine, if still in progress. After takeoff, Elijah found himself reflecting on Veronica's unexpected appearance. Redemption narratives often centered the perpetrator rather than those harmed by their actions. Yet he also recognized the value of converted advocates, those whose first-hand experience with their own biases could sometimes reach people who would dismiss messages from traditional diversity educators. Midway through the flight, he made a decision. He typed an email to Janet Miller, his HR director. Met former Continental flight attendant Veronica Patterson on today's flight. She's pursuing work in diversity education. Consider her for our corporate training division's new airline partnership program. Not as a favor to her, but as an opportunity for our clients to learn from someone who's experienced genuine transformation. The gesture wasn't forgiveness exactly, that wasn't his alone to give for a systemic problem. It was recognition that meaningful change required both accountability and opportunity for growth. As the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, Elijah's thoughts turned to the anniversary event scheduled for the following week. 1 year since the Continental incident, Washington Industries would be launching a major initiative in partnership with the airline, a scholarship program for minority youth interested in aviation careers, from pilots to executives. The program would be named after his grandmother, Ruth Washington, who had taught him to stand tall without standing alone. The symmetry felt right, honoring the woman who had prepared him for a world that would question his belonging, while creating pathways for young people who might face fewer such questions because of changes set in motion that day in first class. His phone chimed with a message from Zara, who had recently graduated summa cum laude from Howard and accepted a position with Washington Industries' new Diversity Technologies division. The role had been her choice, a decision to join the family business not out of obligation but passion for its mission. Dad, just confirmed the last speaker for the Ruth Washington Scholarship launch. The former black flight attendant who supported you during the incident. She's now Continental's youngest ever VP of Customer Experience. She'll be introducing you. Elijah smiled, recalling Maya Jones's determined expression that day on the aircraft. Her rapid advancement wasn't a corporate publicity stunt but recognition of talent that might otherwise have remained marginalized. As the plane touched down, Elijah thought about the complex legacy of that confrontation 6 months ago. A single moment of standing firm had indeed changed trajectories, not just for him, but for Continental's corporate culture, for Maya Jones's career, for Veronica Patterson's perspective, and potentially for thousands of future aviation professionals who would benefit from more inclusive skies. The real transformation wasn't in policies or programs, though these provided essential structure. It was in the countless individual reckonings, from boardroom executives reassessing their assumptions to flight attendants reconsidering their approaches to customer service. Disembarking, Elijah was greeted by the sight of Maya Jones standing at the gate alongside a distinguished black man in a captain's uniform. "Mr. Washington," Maya beamed, extending her hand. "Welcome to Los Angeles. I'd like you to meet someone special. This is Captain James Thornton Jr., son of the gentleman you met on your flight 6 months ago. He'll be flying the inaugural Ruth Washington Scholarship Celebration flight next week." "It's an honor, sir," Captain Thornton said, shaking Elijah's hand firmly. "My father told me about your conversation. What you did that day, it mattered to all of us." As they walked together through the terminal, discussing the upcoming celebration, Elijah felt a moment of profound clarity. The incident that had begun with humiliation had catalyzed genuine change, not because he was a CEO with resources to respond dramatically, but because he had stood firm when standing firm was necessary. His grandmother's voice echoed in his memory, "You stand tall, Elijah. Ain't nobody better than you, and you ain't better than nobody. But you gotta work twice as hard for half as much. That's just how it is." Perhaps, through continued effort across countless fronts, the next generation might face a world where the second half of her wisdom no longer held true, where standing tall didn't require working twice as hard for half as much, but simply bringing one's full talent to a world ready to receive it. That transformation would be the true first-class upgrade, not just for a privileged few, but for an entire society in flight toward its better self. Elijah Washington's story reminds us that discrimination persists regardless of wealth, education, or status. No amount of success can fully shield Black Americans from the reality of racial bias. Yet the story also illustrates the power of standing firm in one's dignity without surrendering to anger or resentment. True change requires both accountability and opportunity for growth. When Elijah fired the crew, he demanded accountability. When he later offered Veronica a path to redemption, he created opportunity for transformation. His response transcended personal vindication to create systemic change. The most meaningful victories often come full circle, from Grandma Ruth teaching young Elijah to stand tall, to the Ruth Washington Scholarship helping new generations rise. This reminds us that our individual actions can ripple outward, changing not just our immediate circumstances but creating new possibilities for countless others. In fighting discrimination, the goal isn't simply to punish wrongdoing but to build something better in its place, a world where standing tall doesn't require working twice as hard for half as much, but simply bringing one's full talent to a society ready to receive it. What moment in your life required you to stand firm against unfair treatment? Would you have handled Elijah's situation differently? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful narratives about courage in the face of injustice. Thank you for joining this important conversation about racism, dignity, and transformation. Remember, your story matters too. Each time we speak truth to power, we help create a more just world for everyone.